So, Vladimir Putin's 30-hour unilateral ceasefire in Ukraine has expired. What next? Today, Komsomolskaya Pravda suggests 7 scenarios, some positive for Moscow, others negative. Among the negatives is that Donald Trump will be turned against Russia by advisers whispering in his ear that Russia is taking him for a ride. One political scientist suggests that the US president has the type of personality that means he can easily become unstable. He creates his own picture of the world, and when that jars with reality, he gets furious. There's a danger Trump has an oversimplified view of the Ukraine conflict. For now, Trump blames Biden for everything, but if the US president doesn't score a success soon in Ukraine, I fear he will turn from peacemaker to warmonger, that sanctions against Russia will be strengthened, and the Zelensky regime will receive support again. Another scenario painted as negative for Russia, that Donald Trump will distance himself from the peace process. A different political scientist says, we, Russia, and Donald Trump are more or less in the same boat. He was the first to call our president and propose a plan to end the Ukraine conflict. There's unlikely to be another political figure in the Western world anytime soon with such opportunities to resolve the Ukraine situation. But it's still likely that Trump will distance himself from the peace process, that London and Paris will send troops to Ukraine under the guise of peacekeepers and will provoke US involvement in the conflict to defend NATO allies. Among the scenarios presented as positive for Russia, as a result of talks, there will be a ceasefire of no less than 3 months. Together, Russia and the US will minimise the influence of the European Union, and this one. Full diplomatic relations will be restored, and we will sign an agreement with Washington on a new détente. For this positive scenario, Trump needs to stay in power, ideally after 2028 too. There is a chance of this happening. Nezavisima Gazeta writes about the difficult path to peace. Stopping the conflict between Russia and Ukraine turned out to be more difficult than Washington imagined. Or, put another way, nothing's been achieved yet that could earn you a Nobel Peace Prize. What we see is clear proof that not all international conflicts can be resolved by a diplomatic cavalry charge, no matter how much the US president tries to convince us of the opposite. Same paper, and an interesting piece by the newspaper's owner, Konstantin Remchukov. He writes about what Russia calls its new territories, the 4 Ukrainian regions seized and occupied by Russia, though not fully, and which Moscow claims to have annexed. Since then, Russian officials have been claiming that the parts of those regions still under Ukrainian control must also become Russia. Last year, President Putin demanded that Ukrainian troops must be withdrawn from the entire territory of these regions within their administrative borders at the time of their being part of Ukraine. But in this piece, Mr. Remchukov concludes that because of the way Russian laws have been written, the boundaries of the new constituent regions were set by boundaries on the ground when they came under Russia's control, boundaries that existed on the day the new regions became part of Russia, not the administrative borders set by Ukrainian law. It's well known that there are politicians in our country, hawks we call them, who believe that the territory of the new constituent regions be defined by the 1991 administrative borders, but this is not apparent. Now again, we're talking about territory Russia has seized since invading Ukraine, land not recognised internationally as Russia. But what's interesting about the article is that it appears to contradict what some senior officials here have been saying. I return to the question I asked at the beginning, what next? And in the same article, Konstantin Remchukov offers a clue. He focuses on what Valery Gerasimov, Chief of the General Staff, told President Putin at their recent meeting, that 99.5% of the territory of Russia's Kursk region has been liberated. It's clear that for Putin, the idea of trading territory of Kursk region is unacceptable. It must be completely free of Ukrainian troops by the time a peace agreement is signed. As soon as the final 0.5% is freed, Russian forces can stop where they are when that news comes. I think, thanks to Steve Witkoff, Trump understands this and is hoping this will happen before the 30th of April so that he can proudly declare his peace mission a success in his first 100 days. In other words, the suggestion here is that we're only going to see President Putin make a deal once he has regained full control over Kursk region. Of course, when you read that the idea of trading Russian territory is unacceptable for Putin, it makes you wonder, why should the idea of trading Ukrainian land be acceptable to Kiev?